The flashing red and blue lights cast erratic shadows across the cracked pavement. Rain drizzles, turning the asphalt slick, reflecting the glow of the police cruisers. A heavy boot slams against the ground. Face down, hands behind your back. The voice is firm, detached, practiced. A second later, cold steel snaps around his wrists. Jamal Davis doesn't resist. His cheek presses against the wet ground, his breathing slow and measured. His eyes remain open, staring ahead, unblinking. Not in fear, not in shock, just waiting. An officer kneels beside him, shoving a plastic baggie into his jacket pocket. White powder, just enough to change a life forever. A second officer, a grizzled veteran, leans in close. Cigarette breath, smug smirk. He pats Jamal's shoulder, a mockery of reassurance. Looks like you messed up real bad, son. Jamal turns his head slightly, just enough for his dark eyes to meet the officer's. Calm. Too calm. The cop's smirk falters for half a second. You sure about that? Jamal's voice is low, smooth, almost amused. The officer stiffens. The cocky grin returns, but it's forced now. A nervous chuckle. Jamal exhales, slow and deliberate. Rainwater drips from his chin. Let me make one call. The words are simple, plain. But something about the way he says them, too confident, too certain, sends a ripple through the air. For the first time that night, the officers hesitate. The interrogation room is sterile. Harsh fluorescent light hums overhead, casting sharp shadows. The air is thick with the scent of old coffee and sweat. Detective Rollins leans back in his chair, arms folded, eyes full of amusement. The kind of amusement that comes from knowing the game is rigged. You're in a world of trouble, Jamal. He chuckles, tapping a manila folder on the table. Possession with intent. That's what? 10, 15 years? Jamal sits still, wrists cuffed, shoulders relaxed. He doesn't blink, doesn't fidget. Rollins shakes his head, smirking. Come on, man. We both know how this plays out. You'll take a plea, maybe get out in 8. Be smart. He leans in, voice dropping. Because let me tell you what's not smart, acting like you've got a way out. Jamal tilts his head, just slightly. Funny thing about that. His voice is steady, almost casual. You sure you know who you just arrested? The smirk fades for a split second before Rollins recovers. Oh, I know exactly who you are. Another punk who thought he was too slick to get caught. Silence, thick, pressing. Jamal finally exhales, slow and deliberate. Go ahead, open my phone. Rollins scoffs but picks it up, unlocking the screen with Jamal's Face ID. His smug expression flickers as his eyes scan the call log. Then it vanishes entirely. Jamal leans in slightly, his voice almost a whisper. You should probably answer that. Detective Rollins stares at the screen, his jaw tightening. The name flashing on Jamal's phone isn't just a name. It's a problem. A big one. Marcus Davis, DEA Administrator. A bead of sweat forms near his temple, but he forces a chuckle, shaking his head. Cute trick, he mutters, sliding the phone back across the table. You really expect me to believe? The phone buzzes again, persistent. Rollins's fingers tap against the folder, a nervous rhythm betraying his frustration. He glances at the two officers in the room. They shift uncomfortably. Jamal watches, silent, waiting. You think dropping a name is going to change anything? Rollins scoffs, but there's a slight edge to his voice now. Forced confidence. I don't care who your brother is. You got caught red-handed. No fancy phone call is gonna... Knock, knock. A sharp rap at the door. The officers exchange looks. Rollins doesn't move. Another knock, louder this time. One of the officers clears his throat. Detective? Rollins glares at him, then exhales sharply. Jesus. Fine. He stands, grumbling under his breath as he unlocks the door. The moment it swings open, his expression shatters. A tall man in a dark suit steps in, flanked by two more agents. No uniform, no badges visible, but their presence commands the room. Jamal, still seated, finally smiles. Just a little. Just enough. You were saying? Rollins doesn't answer. He can't. His smirk is gone. His throat bobs as he swallows hard. Because now, he knows. He just made the worst mistake of his life. The room is dead silent. Detective Rollins blinks. Once. Twice. His mouth opens, but no words come out. His fingers twitch at his sides. The air feels heavier now. The man in the suit steps forward, his expression unreadable. His voice, however, is ice. Detective Rollins. A pause. A slow, deliberate glance at the folder on the table. You've made a grave error. Rollins swallows hard. Save it. The man doesn't blink. Doesn't need to. He nods toward the other agents. Secure the room. The two officers who had stood behind Rollins moments ago hesitate. Then, slowly, one of them reaches for his radio. The other shifts uneasily, stepping aside. Jamal finally moves. He leans back, stretching his fingers, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off a minor inconvenience. Then, with a quiet, amused exhale, he looks up at Rollins. You were real confident back there, he murmurs. Wonder where all that went. Rollins' face is ashen. Sweat beads on his forehead. His hands, once so steady, now tremble at his sides. Jamal tilts his head, his voice smooth. Go ahead, detective. Try to explain this one. Rollins has no words, just fear. The handcuffs snap shut, but this time they aren't on Jamal. Rollins jerks as cold steel bites into his wrists. His breathing is shallow now, eyes darting between the agents who flank him. Wait, hold on. This is a mistake. No. Marcus Davis interrupts, stepping forward. His presence fills the room. The mistake was thinking you could plant evidence and get away with it. He turns to one of the agents. Take him. The officers who once stood by Rollins now step away from him, as if his corruption is contagious. His face is pale, his mouth opening and closing, searching for words that won't come. Jamal rises, smooth and deliberate, shaking out his wrists. No rush, no urgency, just patience. As Rollins is dragged past him, Jamal leans in slightly, his voice low. You should have checked my last name before you pulled this stunt. Rollins' eyes are wide, pleading, but Jamal just watches. Calm, unbothered. The door slams shut behind them. Jamal exhales, rolling his shoulders. Let's get out of here. As he walks free, the last thing we see is the empty chair where he once sat. Justice served.